At long last, welcome to the second episode of the Ride It Out show. These YouTube episodes, the original plan was to release them on a fortnightly basis, but I'll get to the whys later. It's been manic in a good way, mostly. Some stuff's been happening that's not been so good, but hey, again, we'll get to that a bit later on. For now, though, let's just roll that intro. Yeah, when I came up with the concept for rider resilience about 4 years ago, I thought this has got the potential to go pretty big pretty quickly. And I need to be careful because I've got a day job, I've got a young family, I don't want to just be there focusing on that all the time. And, now I've got a little bit more time on my hands. I'm probably doing more than full-time hours working on this project. And a bit later on, after our today's guest, we will have a little chat about ways that potentially people might be able to help out. It's going to be a kind of like a World War II cry for "I need you" coming up on social media and also through this channel. I think it's very important that we build a legacy. It's not just all resting on my shoulders, and we've got a team around me. So that's starting to get built up. But there's a lot of people who've already reached out, and genuinely I've not been able to get back to them. That actually includes people who've submitted their incredible stories, and I've always been kind of encouraging folk to do that because it's such a community-driven project. This, sharing your story is really, really important. And I just wanted to use this opportunity to say I genuinely have been reading them all, been really touched by some of the stories. Heck, some of your stories make me feel like I've literally just had a walk in the park, to be honest, and kind of put me to shame. But what I'm really guilty of is that I've not been able to get back to everyone. With everything that we've got in the pipelines, I feel like if the water level's here, I'm just about still breathing. So I do apologise for not getting back to folk sooner, and I promise that we will do. I say we because we are bringing extra resource in, and there might be somebody else who reaches out to get a little bit more information and kind of document that story in a little bit more detail and do it justice. So that's a project that's happening, but we will get back to folk eventually, 100%. So the exciting news this weekend is that it's Kendal Mountain Festival, and Kendal Mountain Festival has been a massive part of rider resilience. I mean, actually, it's probably what started rider resilience in the first place. I know we've talked about this in the past a little bit, with the likes of Andy McKenna and Martin Ashton being that inspiration, and I'll probably mention it a few times more in future. Looking back now, I mean, the original Rider Resilience film, which is still on Vimeo somewhere if you want to look that up, that was shown at Kendal Mountain Festival in 2018. And got an incredible reception there. That's what planted a seed for me to say, maybe we need to do a little bit more here. We're making these small inspirational ripples. Maybe we can broaden it out and start making this inspirational wake, which is why Rider Resilience Proper was born earlier this year. I got a phone call out of the blue from a guy called Steve Scott. Now, Steve is one of the festival directors, and actually Bike Night is one of the nights that he looks after. And he said, without me having any inclination this might have been happening, "Oh, Nils, by the way, we've chosen Rider Resilience as our official charity for Bike Night. So it basically means that all the proceeds from the raffle tomorrow night go straight to Rider Resilience," which is incredible, absolutely huge, because you've got Trek there, you've got Wheelbase there, you've got 510 and Adidas there, and all of those guys are putting some pretty big prizes into the prize pot. So people buy raffle tickets. I think there's 5 big prize hampers to be won, effectively. We're chucking some stuff in as well, but it's being eclipsed by what the big brands are doing. And the proceeds go straight to Rider Resilience. So it'll be a huge contribution to the funds, and it allows us to do a lot more. Now, off the back of that as well, they've said, hey, look, if you want to have a merch stand there, then you can do. So our first merch drop went down a storm. We have I think we've got just short, or we processed just short of 150 orders between us launching it and now, which is obviously huge. So we've had to go back to our suppliers and do a big replen as quickly as we could in time for Kendal Mountain Festival. And yeah, that's all coming together so that tomorrow we've got some stuff to sell there whilst we're at the show, or whilst we're at the... So yeah, Kendal Mountain Festival bike night. As per every year, the whole thing sold out. I think there's about 900 people turning up. If you have got a ticket, if you're lucky enough to have a ticket, and you haven't managed to get your hands on any merch yet, that is going to be the opportunity to do so. So yeah, look forward to seeing you there. I don't have a big part or anything like that for the night. I think I'm literally just announcing the fact that we're there and maybe introducing the concept of rider resilience to people who might not know it, and that's about it. But yeah, just a little shout out to Steve Scott and the rest of the KMF team, and obviously all the supporting brands for Bike Night, just to thank them for the opportunity to be there as rider resilience. There's some other incredible CICs there as well. You've got Andy with Stoked on MS, you've got the Steezy Collective, and to be picked for the night is absolutely huge. So yeah, thank you very, very much. Now, whilst we're speaking of support, a really exciting announcement to make. Canadian clothing brand 7Mesh are coming on board as a corporate supporter for Rider Resilience for the rest of this calendar year and for all of 2023 at least. So I'll be completely upfront and honest. I am massively biased when I talk about 7Mesh. I think it's my outdoor background really that kind of pushes that, but to give you a quick bit of background information, they're basically, they're based in Squamish in British Columbia. But their background, the guys who founded the brand, well, for all intents and purposes, they ran Arc'teryx for a number of years. And as outdoorsy individuals, obviously were multidisciplined, so did a load of things. They'd go out climbing one day, they'd go out kayaking, paddleboarding, but they'd also ride bikes. And they really struggled to find any apparel that was anywhere near the quality that you'd get in the outdoor industry. The outdoor industry was kind of up there, very much making pinnacle product. And then on the cycling side, you'd be riding in a PU-coated laminated jacket, which just didn't breathe and didn't function properly. So they saw a real gap in the market to do something about that, and started making effectively alpine-grade apparel, but for the cycling market. Now, when that started trickling through to the UK, I was really excited because, again, I found the same thing. Living where we live here in the Lake District, you'd go up into the sort of higher terrain, and a lot of the time you'd see people around you using their mountaineering shells when it go into the proper mountains, because there just wasn't anything of that kind of quality in the cycling world. And that's really starting to change now. Beyond that, they're really conscious about what materials they source. They're conscious about being able to offer a repair service on all their garments, a crash replacement service, so that if you do end up damaging your item, you can get it repaired to a very, very high standard, which means it doesn't just need to go into landfill. And that resonates really, really highly with me. I think when you're buying these sorts of garments, they're not cheap, but it's an investment. And, when you're investing like that, you're leaving a smaller environmental footprint than just buying something, wearing it for a year and then changing it. So a lot of their colour palette is fairly neutral as well. So you can wear it for a number of years and it doesn't just go out of fashion every 6 months. So we can only really applaud that. So the other thing that really resonates with us is how they, as a brand, try to pay back into their local community. The whole history around sort of colonialism in Canada isn't my strong point at all, but obviously we hear snippets of news reports of the Indigenous people being forced into boarding schools and there being mass graves, etc. And actually, 7Mesh, the guys at 7Mesh are really aware that they are trading on borrowed land. The land isn't theirs, the land belongs to the local Indigenous people, and really the only reason they're there is because of colonialism. So it's still a learning journey for them, and they're finding out more and more as that journey progresses. But what they are trying to do is be a force for good as a business, and to try to reinvest in those communities, which unfortunately have become very, very alienated because of that kind of colonialist behaviour. So they're trying to reintegrate these people and you know, introduce them to the world of cycling, introduce them to mountain biking. And that's obviously where it really resonates with us as Rider Resilience, is trying to kind of add diversity and using the bike as a force for good. And hopefully those people will feel a lot better about life in general if they get a real sense of belonging, if that makes sense, and integration into a wider society. So we massively applaud their work. We're fully behind it. If ever there's an opportunity for us to kind of pay back and help them out, then we absolutely will. But for now, they have sent us a little show reel to give us an idea of what they're all about. You'll see me when I'm riding. I've always been riding 7-mesh gear for the last couple of years. And when they use their strapline gear to disappear, it really does work, and you really forget that you're wearing it. Case in point, their newest WTV fabric. I've been using the Chilco anorak for riding, and you know, the sort of shoulder seasons like we've got now, it's literally the only garment you need. It keeps you perfectly controlled, in equilibrium, you don't heat up too much, it keeps the wind off you, and when you stop you don't cool down. I can't recommend it highly enough. If you're not familiar with the brand, I'll put some links down in the description below. Have a look, read up about where they're from, what they're all about. They're going to be with us for a good while, and yeah, we're super appreciative for all their support, and they're going to be a big part of our film going forward as well. So thank you to the guys at 7-mesh, and we look forward to this partnership and how it will develop. Now, a good friend of Rider Resilience, well, good friend of mine, I should say. We kind of know him through the lion side of my life, but a guy called Graham Stewart. He's better known as Stormstatic. He's an illustrator, designer, and I went to him with a bit of a concept to make maybe like a sticker about bottling the tonic, bottling the spirit of what you get when you go for a bit of a dawn raid. And then we kind of jokingly said, well, it could be like a blood bag or something, or like a drug bag which goes in IV straight into your vein, and it's something that you can pick off the shelf and just, you know, plumb straight into your arteries and just make it flush around your veins and get that kind of feel good factor. Now, he's made it into a time lapse. What he's designed, it's an incredibly cool design in my opinion, but we're just not quite sure how best to use it, and it'd be cool to get your thoughts on it. Because you know, it potentially lends itself really nicely to a sticker, and maybe that's something that we need to look at, like put it in as part of a sticker pack. We could maybe make it holographic. I've tried it on a t-shirt, not really my sort of style, but some people might be bang into it. So yeah, really keen to get some community feedback on that one, really. I'll put the finished design on here as well, a link to it so you can have a little look. But yeah, put your comments down below. Let us know what you think we should do with it. Be really cool to hear your thoughts and to develop that further, actually. Now it's time to introduce our second guest. I couldn't not make it Andy McKenna. You know, when we loop back to the first Ride It Out episode, it was obviously Martin Ashton, you know, a big name in the world of cycling and in the world of mountain biking particularly. But Andy McKenna was probably the biggest I don't know if this is a word, but inspirer, but the guy who inspired me the most to pick up my bike again following my diagnosis, given his struggles with multiple sclerosis himself, and the fact that actually, you know, it's an incurable disease. So in many ways we're very connected. Obviously Andy's condition has also evolved over the last 5 years. And we weren't sure if we were even going to be able to meet, because he'd also had some ups and downs in the weeks prior to us meeting. But lo and behold, it all worked out. I went to Clovenfords, where Andy's based, and we spent a cracking day together, just chewing the fat, talking about all sorts. You know, that kind of affects our lives. But fundamentally, we got out for a little spin as well, which was the tonic that we were both after. So it was nice to sort of share that experience, even though it was absolutely biblical towards the end of it, and we got completely soaked to the skin. It was just super nice to get out. Now, bit of a funny anecdote for you. You'll see the beginning of this video. I'm there sort of stoking his fire in his shed, and I'd been on a pretty high dose of steroids in the lead up to it, so I'd barely slept the night before, and I'm in this sort of like state of flux, like semi-dream state. The trouble is with heat, it's Andy's kryptonite, so the more I'm kind of like adding fuel to the fire, the more he's starting to struggle with MS symptoms, and you can sort of tell when we're interviewing that some of his words are a little bit more slurred than they perhaps normally might be. You can tell that his mind is not as sharp as it perhaps is. And as the interview progresses, he's becoming more and more talkative again as the fire sort of dies down. So I do apologise if there is a little bit of a, some sections where we feel like both of us are not really making sense, we're slurring our words. There are medical reasons behind this, but nevertheless, I think the interview is still really, really poignant. It covers, Andy's journey, where he's come from, and actually also how he has managed to, do a lot of good stuff without relying on traditional medication that you'd get through the NHS for his condition, which I think is an incredibly important message, because for him, genuinely riding bikes and getting out, stress management and using a more holistic approach has allowed him to live an incredible life given his condition so far. And you just don't know how different it would have been if he'd been on traditional medicine with all the side effects that come with it. So yeah, without further ado, here's the interview between Andy and myself. Andy, we've come to your place here in Clovenford, in Scottish Borders. We're in your bothy, if I can call it that. You kind of converted workshop. Thanks a lot for having us. This is the first episode where I've actually gone out and met somebody for Rider Resilience in the flesh to do this interview, and we'll go out for a bit of a ride later, which is exactly the kind of concept that we want to kind of start embellishing. But I kind of wanted to paint the picture why I chose you as one of the first people to come and interview, because you probably don't know it, but you've been this incredibly inspirational character to me in my journey, and it kind of dates back to, I think it was 2017, Kendal Mountain Festival, and it was you and Martin Ashton who were at the festival, and you just launched This Way Up, the film. And it was premiere then, perhaps, I can't remember the details, but I just started chemotherapy probably about 3 months prior to that. I was in a world of bother. I put my bike away and thought, I can't face this, I can't ride bikes at the moment. I just couldn't fathom the mind space. And I went to Kendal Mountain Festival, and you were there, showing how actually, despite your diagnosis and frankly being in very little control of your bike at times, were able to get out, and you were just beaming. You were absolutely, you could tell that getting out on your bike made you live. And I thought, I came away and I was completely inspired, and I thought, you know what? Those guys are not letting their diagnosis, their condition, depict what they can and can't do. I'm going to go after that. I'm going to go and do the same thing. And the following weekend, I picked up my bike, and hand on heart, I can genuinely say, I think if it wasn't for that move and starting to ride bikes again, I'm not sure if I'd be here today. It's kind of given me that much. So for me to come and chat to you about that today, absolutely means a lot. But I know we've chatted before. We've obviously got a blog up on the Rider Resilience page already. And I kind of wanted to dig a little bit deeper into some of the kind of thoughts that you might have had when you got diagnosed and how you kind of dealt with that, really. So to me, obviously, Andy McKenna, well-known industry character. You've been around for years. You've got this amazing guiding business that you've built up. But for people who perhaps come from outside of the industry, it might be worth just explaining where you've come from before that, and then what led you to setting up GoWhere Scotland, and also like how the diagnosis kind of mixed into that as well.
Well, thanks for being here, and thanks for that very generous introduction. It's so. What can I say? A little bit more background on. I mean, I've been mad for mountain bikes since I was a kid. Well, mad for bikes, full stop. Since I was wee, and I was always a real trier, but I never had the skill set. I was always into BMX as a youngster, and I throw myself off everything and anything, and usually land on my head and fast track to accident and emergency. I was no stranger to getting stitched up and getting gravel rash removed from my thighs and my bum
with a stiff brush.
So when mountain bikes came along, that was a real, that was a real revelation for me. That was I was back in the mid-80s actually. And I thought, oh, I want a bit of that, you know, yeah, it's something that has been a real staple for me for decades. So it's just it's fascinating to see the way the sport's evolved and developed, and to never have really lost the bug.
So then, obviously, you've been huge into mountain biking. That's been a big part of your life. Your diagnosis happened when you were not a mountain bike guide. You'd not set up what you'd intended to do. What were you doing at the time then?
I was a rider just as a hobby, but I worked in marketing and copywriting and higher education marketing. Shirt, tie, you know, a kind of semi-proper job, I guess, and always kind of felt like a bit of a square peg round hole. It was definitely not a passion of mine, and the organisation that I used to work for, they were getting restructured, and I thought, maybe there's a wee opportunity here, and I managed to take a bit of a severance package with a view to setting up, you know, breaking all the cardinal rules. Don't make your passion your hobby a career. But
Rules are there to be broken sometimes, aren't they?
yeah, so that was kind of the start of it.
And then, am I right in thinking that that happened prior to being diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, or was it?
It was kind of bizarrely kind of around about the same time. The opportunity was there, and it kind of came at a time that all sorts of weird stuff was happening with me health-wise, and it took several years after that before they actually gave it a name and gave it a label. Because I think the criteria for diagnosing MS now is slightly different from back then. You need to have certain kinds of symptoms within certain time frames, certain frequency and time frame before they would give it a name. So for 2 years I was just experiencing lots of random weird stuff, and really looking for answers. And you know, multiple sclerosis had been referenced as a potential. So ironically, it was kind of a catalyst to go, I've only got one go at this life, and I've got an opportunity to shape it my way and make it fit me. Or I could have just kept taking the salary and stayed in a job that I didn't altogether love. So I took the latter, which is ironic because I now appreciate that stress and anxiety is a real trigger for MS symptoms and flare-ups, which is unavoidable when you're self-employed. But it's also given me the flexibility and the latitude to kind of shape things on my terms more.
Yeah. So when you first got your diagnosis, then I mean, I look back at my own diagnosis, and I think perhaps with it being a variety of symptoms and taking so long to kind of be actually formally diagnosed, it might have been a bit more of a route of acceptance, perhaps, that you kind of knew this might be happening. Whereas with me, it was like, you've got 5 years, and it was clear as, you know, it was just clear as light, effectively, that was what I had to work with. But in your case, then, how did you deal with that? I mean, did you go, excuse my French, fuck it, I'm going to just carry on? And initially, because the symptoms were more sporadic, you just lived your life as normal to as much as in as far as possible, or?
Honest truth is complete bloody minded denial. Total denial for between 5 and 7 years. Anila will know better. But I, you know, to backtrack a little bit, I get rushed into hospital with a suspected brain hemorrhage. Should have been dead, assuming that their diagnosis was right. I should, but apparently I was. You know, I went from completely, you know, incomprehensible, unable to speak, talk. Bizarrely, the only thing that I managed to say was something like dead, eccentric Spanish architect. And from that, the doctors were able to go through the phone book on my phone and deduce that Aneela, my wife, worked at the Scottish Parliament, and were able to track her down. And like, this is really grave, you need to be here now. And I found this all quite absurd because I felt fine and I thought I was talking to everyone, but words weren't forming. And instead of, if it had been a brain hemorrhage, apparently I wouldn't be here. But I got up the next day and I was okay. So it was a misdiagnosis. It was something else, but in the process of scans and lumbar punctures and all that stuff, they found out something else. And after this big episode where I'd gone into hospital, it left me with some weird symptoms down right side, lack of feeling and various things, which never went away, but it kind of made me think, I really don't know where things are going, don't really know what's going on here, don't have an answer, but God, you really want to be, working on someone else's terms for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
This is the opportunity to start shaping things and making a really good go of it, and simultaneously denying that something significant was going on. But the reality is, as I was mountain bike guiding, I started becoming aware of balance issues, lack of feeling and grip, and cognitive, fogginess. And, I did have to eventually face facts that, they were right. There was something at work. And, stop putting the poor NHS through the ringer and check me for Lyme's disease and mercury poisoning and, every other alternative that it could be, which it wasn't,
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah, that acceptance. So then fast forward a little bit. I mean, obviously, the diagnosis is what it is. It's a degenerative disease, so there's no cure for it as such. You largely manage it to a degree with riding and kind of homeopathic stuff rather than kind of going down the traditional medicine route. Is that right in saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think the NHS is an incredible thing. But for me, the advice and the suggestions about the particular kind of therapies that I should be getting involved in and accepting, I just didn't feel comfortable with the with that. So I do still. What's this? 2022. So that's 15 years. 15 years on. Much to my neurologist's frustration, respectful frustration. I still manage it through what I eat and what I don't eat. Activity, exercise, stress management. I'm maybe not as religious and disciplined as I could be, because I still will need to live. Will need to enjoy living. But certainly the staples for me: low stress, good eating, trying to stay active physically and mentally, and I have to put my hand up and say that there is one thing that's been a major bonus for me, which I prescribe something called Sativex, which is medical cannabis, and that helps a variety of unsavoury symptoms, just dulls them down a bit.
No, brilliant. Yeah, that's good to hear. So, I mean, in terms of like your like the status quo now, then in terms of riding, like what are like your triggers that really actually stop you from riding with MS? Like what do you find?
The some of the kind of staples with MS, fatigue, which if you've not suffered from fatigue, it's quite a bizarre one when you can't physically hold the weight of your head, or your eyeballs or your eyelids. So fatigue's pretty standard. Cognition, just inability to process things, lack of grip, sensation, balance, stuff that you kind of really rely on the bike.
Yeah.
And ironically, adrenaline, any kind of stressor, whether it's caffeine, whether it's adrenaline on the bike.
Oh, really?
These things can exacerbate the symptoms no end. So I have to pick and choose where I ride, when, and what kind of riding I'm going to be able to do with a margin for error, you know.
Sure.
So I used to love the steeps, the techie, the slow, the steeper, the gnarlier, the better. But it's more about just getting up a hill and being outside for me nowadays. And that's almost enough.
I totally get that. I think, I talk about rider resilience and I'm always like, it's about the bike and getting out the bike. But actually you could rein it back and say, you know what, just get outside and do something, not in the house, and kind of take that outside space is going to make a big difference. But I did read an article the other day that basically said biking actually gives you more of that fulfillment because you do have to think about other things. So your mind is more engaged and you come away from that nearly more refreshed because the memories and the actions are like more profound. You've got to balance, you've got to brake at the right time. All stuff that's super difficult to do, obviously, with your condition. But I thought it was interesting that it's, you could go outside and go for a walk, but actually biking gives you that little bit more of a benefit, which is interesting.
Absolutely, and I think for me, knowing a little bit about MS and my response, everybody's MS is different. Understanding neuroplasticity and the need to practice and habituate certain things, that forces the mind, the brain to rewire.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you're just really not on it, it can just be as little as getting outside, getting up a hill. But some days when you're really feeling it, you're feeling good, then you maybe want to take on something a bit more involved, a bit chunkier. And then you get excited and then the tremors start and you're like, okay, I need to dial it back a little bit again for this next section. And it's a fascinating teacher.
Yeah.
It forces you to kind of learn things about yourself, about triggers, and about life in general, I guess.
Yeah, and be dynamic with it. Now, if you were to say to me, Andy's perfect ride now, if you said, okay, this afternoon we're going to go for a ride, you can choose any weather, any bike, you could do whatever you want. What would that look like now, given your condition? What's the perfect scenario?
Okay, well, I hope we can go and get a little taste of that at some point today. I love where we live. We're spoiled rotten. I can literally just jump on the bike and straight out the back door. We're surrounded by beautiful landscapes, and maybe a couple of decent bits of single track too. I love being at home. The riding here. Everybody knows.
Everyone knows.
Everyone knows the Tweed Valley is a mega location for riding bikes. So that's why we moved here about 18 years ago to the Scottish borders. Was instead of having to get in the car and travel for hours to get to our bike, and we're fortunate to be able to just turn a key, go out the door and ride. And
that's well before this area became as developed as it is now, obviously. Yeah.
Justifiably, it's gone off. It's amazing.
Yeah. And temperature-wise, then, is this too warm, too cold, not on perfect? How does
this is my favourite time of year because MS is very heat sensitive. A lot of my symptoms are really dependent on ambient temperature and core temperature from being active. So autumn is my absolute favourite time of year. Summer, it's not uncommon to find me hanging about in the supermarket chilled freezer section,
Where's Andy? He's got the peas under his arms.
It's almost true. So yeah, I'm kind of coming into my time of year.
Yeah. Now, I think it's fair to say people who know you, they know you as like an incredibly positive person. Do you find yourself sometimes in a bit of a hole? Like, is there a different Andy to the Andy that people see, or do you always go, I need to embrace humour and positivity, and that's kind of part of your coping strategy on a day-to-day basis?
I mean, the honest truth is that I'm no different from you or anyone else. probably the best person to ask is my wife Anila. She will tell you that I'm a miserable bastard. But the truth is that some days you just want a break from MS. You just don't want to be aware of it, you know. But 99% of the time, I'd say I've got a pretty irreverent philosophy about MS, and I got a pretty decent attitude. But sometimes, you know, especially during the summer this year when it was really hot for us Scots, you know, because you do want to be outside, you do want to be enjoying it, you want to be on your bike, you want to be seeing people, but you just can't get your brain and your body to operate, you know. And then, you know, it cools down a little bit and you're like, right, the button has been pressed, I'm going out. But my attitude doesn't always hold, but I understand what's going on with me. Yeah. So I'm pretty quick to get back to a position where I'm being philosophical and I'm managing it reasonably well. But I can't pretend that, you know, some days when you're having a flare-up, you're like, am I going to come out of this? Am I going to be able to walk again? You know, I've been in my bed 3 days now. You know, when is it coming back? So, you know, sometimes you're trying to suppress that anxiety because you're like, I'm having a bad one, you know, right, what do I need to do here? I need to get a bit more discipline with my eating, stop drinking the beer, you know, get in the cold showers, and, you know, and it usually comes back, but I don't take that for granted. And I guess not taking things for granted is ironically one of the biggest blessings of having something like this going on. It really forces you to think, wow, I've got it good, and extract the goodness from what you do have. But, you know, like anyone, some days you're just like, oh, fuck it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you're down, if you've got those kind of episodes where you're bedbound, do you find that your mind wanders? Do you worry about the future a lot then? Sort of like, well, I mean, you mentioned, yeah, hopefully I'll bounce back. And, you know, with me, I know of situations where I've been like that, and I think, it's all right. It's a chemo cycle. I've got this routine. I know that this is a down day and tomorrow's a better day. But, you know, then you do find your mind wandering like, well, you know, actually, is this a sign of the treatment not working anymore? And perhaps we need to switch things up. Do you find like that can get you bogged down?
I sometimes, not just sometimes, probably quite frequently, I feel for Anila. Anila's as strong as anyone I know, but she didn't, you know, we've been together 26 years and she didn't sign up for what she's got now. And if I worry about the future, if I worry about anything, it's probably more about her than me. It's probably easier for me going through the vagaries of MS than it is for somebody watching. And when she sees a flare-up or I'm having a bad day or week or whatever, I can feel it weighing down on her. You know, is this going to turn back round? Is this the start of something else? So I feel for her.
Yeah, I can completely relate to that. I think my other half is exactly the same, you know, rock solid. And then you can tell that actually they share your own anxiety, and you can see their mannerism effectively changing because they carry it as well, and they've got the same worries, but they don't want to burden you with it and go, I'm really worried, because they don't want to say, but you can kind of read it. And, you know, it's not a competition, but I think their suffering is often just as profound as our own, and that's something that we've kind of got to take into account. No, absolutely.
How do you feel, Nils, about, you know, Rider Resilience is an incredible initiative, and you will build and are building an important movement. But how does it feel putting yourself in this position as editor, curator of something like that, given your own personal circumstances? In one way, you're using that space that you're occupying to drive this, but in another way, you're trying to sidestep and be a curator an editor, but the two things are so heavily intertwined. What does that feel like?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think, without a doubt, having this as a project, it gives me clarity and headspace. It gives me something to focus on. So I've always, like, our coping strategy at home in the last 5 years has been very much normality insofar as possible. So to a large extent, my kids, they know that daddy's poorly. They know that daddy's got these weird plasters on his tummy and things like that. He's got a big scar, often goes to hospital. But I don't know the extent of kind of what's looming around the corner. And that's because we've had this kind of normality as a coping strategy. When I was recently told that actually, we all knew that the clock doesn't stop ticking. You get this diagnosis in the medical world. Yeah, there's some amazing success stories, but a lot of the time they do tend to be right. And they said, we need to start looking at a life expectancy of months rather than years. I sort of thought, well, what do I really want to achieve? And over the years, I've been doing a bit of writing and a bit of photography about how much bikes have given me solace and actually given life back to me. And I've had so many people get in touch with me saying, like, this is so inspirational. And I was sat at home and the rain was lashing against the windows, and I thought, what a rubbish day. And then I read this story about you, and I thought, well, what am I doing here? I should get my riding kit out and go and ride. And I had the best days riding ever. I'm super thankful. And those messages, given the difficulty for me to process that situation, it gives me like instant gratification that I'm making someone's life better. And it just made me think, you know what, I am so happy to dedicate time to starting something like this, that then if I'm making little ripples, if they can be amplified with people like you, people like Martin Ashton, people who very much get it, and we can get the message out, it's a little thing, but it leaves a bit of a legacy. It means that actually I'm trying to, and it sounds really big, but trying to leave the world in a better place than I found it in my community, and pay back to the community that's meant so much to me. Most of my good friends, we all ride mountain bikes, and my whole life is kind of built around gravel and mountain bikes. So it's about giving back, and selfishly as well, about having a bit of a focus, something not to just sit in a corner and think, well, what's tomorrow hold? What's next month hold? What's 2 months away hold? I mean, we've got a big film project in the pipeline, and sometimes I think, am I actually going to see it being launched? Who knows? But it's something to focus on, and that gives me a lot of strength. And it's nearly like they say, well, you can do something, and I'm like, well, watch me turn this burner up over here and go the other way, and actually find more energy than I realised I had.
Amazing.
Yeah. So that's a very long answer,
no,
but that's sort of where I'm at with it.
It's amazing,
Yeah.
and it's mirrored to some extent that sometimes when my head goes down, which it inevitably does, my little Stoked on MS community, which is, just there for me to rant and ramble, and for other people to, share experiences of what works for them, what doesn't work, looking for advice, looking for inspiration. And I draw on that as much as I input to that little community. I if my head's down and I'm like, I'm not going out today, or somebody will say something about some new piece of research or something that's working for them, and I'll look into it, or they'll just leave a message, an email or something on the socials, and it just gives you, or I'll maybe see you saying something or doing something, or Kate O'Callaghan, for example, and it'll just be the little boost that I needed at that moment in time. Didn't even know I needed it, but it'll be enough to turn my mindset round, and also re-engage me and remind me that it's important to be, Stoked on MS is important, rider resilience is important. It's important to be creating platforms to allow communities to grow and develop, and share hope and solace and comfort and all these things. And as you say, to try and leave a corner of this world in better shape in some way than it perhaps was.
Totally, and I think, like, obviously the backbone to rider resilience is my cancer story, but I think there's so many elements to the bike where it can help people. And you know, one of the stories I really want to document is like human displacement. There's people who are being forced to leave everything behind, move in their, you know, as a family, leave everything behind, move as a family, not know anyone or anything. And if they then get access to like a bicycle, it gives them a form of independence. And it might even be that they can't ride a bike and they actually learn to ride a bike. And I just think stories like that will also resonate with people who might not ride bikes at all. And, you know, perhaps think, well, what can I do? I'm going through some type of hardship, whether it's, you know, it could be depression or addiction or whatever. And they stumble across rider resilience and they're inspired enough to go, well, you know what? I'm going to get a bike and I'm going to just ride it twice a week. And they think, makes me feel really good. I'm going to start doing that 4 times a week, 5 times a week. And then they go, well, you know what? I might as well leave my car at home. If I've got a car to commute, I'm gonna ride to work. And suddenly they've benefited from it as an individual, but the world's benefited from it from an environmental point of view. And it's those like little snowball effects from like we start in a little seed and how far can that go? And that's kind of what excites me. It's like we don't just want to be telling stories about MS or cancer or, you know, grief or addiction, but let's talk about the wider story of the bicycle and how that can help people in all walks of life. And the government attitude is changing as well. It'll take time, but they're prescribing cycling for people who are obese in small doses. But if we've got this inspirational platform that's ready made, they can just say, well, go and have a look at this. Have a little read, and you come away thinking, oh, that's really good. So for me, it's, yeah, that's, I mean, gosh, I've got to sometimes rein myself in because I think the plans could be so big and there's only effectively me. Right now, it's about doing the basics and putting in place a continuity plan or a contingency plan. So there's enough of a team around us that actually things keep going. But yeah, I think telling these stories is important and finding key characters who, you know, can bring an interesting view on things and just, yeah, make for an interesting listen. I think will be really good. And it has to be community driven. People need to be like, I'm going to share my story with this guy because actually I want to be able to tell that. And I've had some people reach out to me where genuinely blown away by, I mean, a girl reached out recently and she was like, I was working for the police in it's like child protection basically, and she saw some stuff which made her beyond depressed to the point where she was actually ready to take her life, and she nearly tried twice. Then discovered mountain biking through some friends and managed to ride out of that. Was riding mountain bikes, got really fit for 6 months, got really into it, and found a lump in a breast. So I had breast cancer and had the whole treatment, stage 3 breast cancer. That finished, went into remission. Lockdown happened, COVID happened. So it's 2 years of just being by yourself. And you look at that and what she's gone through. But now she's absolutely beaming. And she's reached out to me and we're like, these are the stories that we want to share because it just resonates so much. And it's interesting. It's everyday people who don't need to have famous people left, right and centre. It's everyday stories that can affect anyone. And we can take little pieces away from and think, you know what, this is really inspirational. This is really good.
And the things that we can do, I'm uncomfortable with the inspire word and inspirational, and people generously use that around me, and I'm completely ill at ease with that because I personally didn't set out on that mission. I just felt as though there was a story that, you know, because MS there's nothing pretty about MS. So there's and everything that everybody that's diagnosed with it, all the stories and messaging around it and all the information has an inevitable slide into, you know, a fairly dark place, whether it's blindness, whether it's immobility, whether it's can't swallow, bedridden. And I just felt as though, you know, there's more stories than that, and there must be more people out there, you know, fighting this or living with this in particular ways that they're not just like giving into it. And it's been incredibly inspirational for me because, you know, I need that as much as I just want to shout about the frustrations and the revelations around MS. For me, I'm also drawing on the information and the, you know, people are like, you know, I was having such a bad day and I'm so glad I went out there and I did it, or I just, whatever you said on your random ramblings on Instagram, Andy, you just got me off my arse, and it works.
That's it.
It works both ways. And it is definitely a source of comfort to know that we're not alone in this. And whether it's MS, whether it's cancer, as you say, whether it's agoraphobia and just not getting outside, or whether it's, you know, whatever form adversity is coming in for you, it's just amazing the commonality around, I got on a bike. You know, whether you're a newbie or you've been doing it all, you know, I got back on the bike and actually it did something important to me. And sometimes I need that reminder. You know, sometimes I'm slipping. Things think the walls are closing in, symptoms are flaring up, and it's just so good to get that reminder. And you're like, I'm going. I don't care what it looks like. I might be tripping and stumbling and staggering about a mountain like a drunk, but I'm not. You can send your helicopter back home, guys. I'm fine. But yeah, the bike is important for so many of us.
Well, what you won't see on this video, obviously, is that, you know, prior to us starting to record, we were having a bit of a play with a log burner. We've made it about 45 degrees in this little bothy, and the problem with that is that obviously it's one of your kind of like big factors that makes your MS flare up. So,
I mean, it's funny because I'm even aware of it right now, Nels. Heat is like my kryptonite. Heat, whether it's ambient room temperature or whether it's through exercising. But that wood burner, that stove, now that it's cooling down, it feels like somebody's flicked a switch, because now my brain and my mouth are synchronising in a way 10 minutes ago they weren't. It's really bizarre because I feel quite euphoric all of a sudden, and that's temperature change. So peculiar, man.
Brilliant. Well, Andy, I think we've covered a lot of great ground there. It's nice to have a chat, and we'll continue, you know, with a bit of a ride out a bit later on. But yeah, thank you for having us here and welcome us to your house, and dedicating your time to have a bit of a chat. It's been great. We'll put some links as well to, you know, the stuff that you're working on in terms of Stoked on MS and the groups and things like that in the description, so that people can check that out, and we'll keep spreading the word.
Great to see you.
Thank you. What an incredible guy. I've just got a lot of time for Andy, and I'm looking forward to seeing him tonight at Kendal Mountain Festival, where he's going to be showing Revolution, which we sort of teased last time to a wider audience. I'm super keen to see how that goes down later on. Earlier on, obviously mentioned, you know, not everything's been great news on my side, and that's kind of been part of the reason why I've been drowning a little bit. Just very quickly, just to kind of fill you in, I think basically there's some lesions low down in the pelvis, which have kind of got themselves nestled in an area that's really difficult to get to, and fundamentally there's some lesions that are pressing on some nerves that are coming out of, you know, the lower part of my spine, but that tumour there is getting a little bit cozy with the bone itself, and I think the worry is that it could potentially get into the spine and cause more trouble. So long and short of it is, what they're looking at doing is switching to a bit of radiotherapy. So next week I've got what's called like I think it's called like a preparation scan, or like a positioning scan, where they go and find out exactly where they need to zap. And then I'll find out more in terms of kind of regularity, how many sessions there are, etc. So yeah, long and short of it is, you know, that's obviously still happening in the background. The whole rider resilience thing is great, but we've still got, you know, a family to spend time with, and we've still got you know, the kind of healthcare side of things, which obviously takes precedent over anything. That's the most important thing. And off the back of that, it's reminded me that, you know, at the moment I'm kind of doing a lot of this myself, and whilst that's great, I'm definitely a bit of a control freak, and I can be a bit OCD. I'm just really conscious I don't want the whole project to become me laying some foundation blocks and it not going anywhere. So I'm kind of drawing on the goodwill from the community to say, hey, look, if this really resonates with you and you feel like you can help out, we need to build like a collective of people who are all kind of chipping in and helping out. But I just want to draw your attention to a particular page on the website, which is how you can help out. And it starts from the very top, which is effectively just, you know, share the page, like the page, subscribe to our page and channels. That's already massive, but it goes all the way to kind of like, you know, if you're a graphic designer, reach out via email and we'll get back to you eventually. I'd say avoid Instagram if possible. Yes, you can, turns out you can flag messages there, but they just get lost really quickly. And if we go via email, at least we've got a bit of a thread that we can go back to. Be really good. If you can help in any way, drop us an email and we can sort of see what resources out there. But let us know what you can do as well. If you've got any ideas, put the ideas forward. I haven't got a completely set plan in place in terms of what we want to achieve. So yeah, any thoughts, any kind of ideas, let me know and we can take it from there. Because I'm conscious that actually sometimes giving somebody a brief and saying it's exactly what I want and how I want to do it, that takes just as much time as just saying, well, I'm just going to do it myself and I can just make this this YouTube podcast myself. So yeah, if you could check that page out, that'd be amazing. If there's any way you can help, be absolutely superb. I'd love lots of people to be involved in the project, and I think it's the only way it's going to get as big as we want it to be and for it to really kind of survive longer term. So that kind of bookends the Ride It Out episode number 2. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm hopeful that the third one will be 2 weeks from now. We've got some irons in the fire for some pretty awesome interviews. And yeah, it will hopefully be just as inspirational as today's chat. And look forward to seeing you then. All right, take care. We'll roll the outro.